a general open discussion. I've already discussed this with a few developers who I was able to catch here internally, but I wanted to make it a general discussion. No, so I'm not going to share the screen now. I don't have really nothing to share for this. So generally, I would like to discuss the relationship between the plugins framework or the plugins that we're currently implementing and the SDK. It appears to be there's a dependency, currently a dependency between the plugins that we create and the SDK that relies basically on the fact that the SDK contains the plugin manager and all the interfaces that are related to plugins. And SDK is the first endpoint where the plugins take place. But the initial implementation was that it was before I rejoined the company, so I'm not sure exactly why, but there was probably good reason to include the plugin manager within the SDK. But what it causes basically a dependency. When you create a new plugin, you're basically dependent on what's going on in the SDK. And the major point of concern here is that changes in the SDK might break the implementation of the plugins. And since we have many plugins that are developed in many regions and many teams, this can be an issue where you update something in the SDK, but inadvertently you break something with a plugin. That's something that we would not like to create. And also in the more theoretical aspect, assuming that we're trying to create here a product where plugins are developed not only internally here at Applicaster, but also by external developers, we would like to create a situation where a developer who's creating a plugin does not need to rely on the SDK at all. Not for shared code, meaning code that the utility classes or any code that can be used, general purpose code, and not necessarily on any other part of the SDK. So basically, these are the two major things that we would like to achieve. Firstly, the independence of the plugin system to be able to be developed by other developers, and also preventing situations where we update the SDK and break the plugins. So this is the idea behind that I would like to present behind separating the two. And in addition, there are some infrastructure code or some frameworks that are currently implemented in the SDK in ways that the plugins cannot necessarily use them. I encountered myself at least 2 plugins that needed to implement OKHTTP code, OKHTTP manager code for different purposes, and none of them changed the actual infrastructure that relies in the SDK. They chose to implement them separately, and it just makes sense that there will be an infrastructure that is common to all plugins to be used, and having it external from what's currently written in the SDK can also help us make changes to the current code in the SDK without actually breaking apps that are based on the SDK. I hope I made myself clear, meaning there might be code that is written in the SDK that we would like to rewrite, but making the change directly on the SDK sounds like a problematic approach or might break too many apps. So if we write it again externally and make all the changes that we want, we can gradually update the SDK back to that. So this will also be a possibility, but this is the third reason is the least important of the 3. So basically, this is the reason behind the idea that I'm presenting now. I know that in iOS there is already the iOS team already implemented something similar or in that kind of idea, and they have their issues, obviously. But the concept here is, which I think is common to both platforms, is that basically we're trying to create a product. It's a new product, basically. It's not so new, but it's separate from the SDK. So first of all, I would like to hear some of your thoughts. As I said, I already discussed it with a few developers, but if people are hearing it for the first time, maybe you can share your thoughts and maybe if you have some objections or ideas that are contrary, you can please share them if you feel like.
So you hear my, so you like to hear it again, or it's fine? You know,
If I heard it, then possibly nobody else heard it. So yeah, it's a good place to raise them, of course, again.
So about the third point, I already create a plugin utilities repository. So if there is a common code, please put it there, so people can reuse it in the plugin. About the first point, that there is a dependency between the SDK and the plugins. What I think should be done is create a new repository, test repository, that all our Applicaster unit tests gonna sit over there. And every time that somebody like to push something, Circle CI, not just running the code in his repository, it's also running the code in this repository, the test repository. And then we able to test all the dependencies together. So it should be the test from the SDK and from the generic and all the plugins. Everything gonna sit on one repository, and all the dependency gonna be like test compile. And as I said, every time where some developer push something, so this repository will build and test, and everything gonna test. The second point was the guy.
Yeah, sorry.
What was the second point? Remind me.
Second reason for if you are an external developer, that's the idea. External developers don't need to know what.
So all the interface, like we should have like interface repository that all our interface gonna sit over there. And it's going to be dependent. Dependent over there, and every plugin that generates some, going to implement some interface, going to sit over there, and then we absolutely separate the dependency between the SDK and other plugins.
Mm-hmm.
This is
okay.
I have a problem with creating another repository for doing tests. Who will maintain this? How is this maintained? Is it me every time that a person needs to push code, he needs to push it to 2 different repositories?
No.
Something is broken there.
No. Every time that I'm pushing code to the SDK or to my plugin, this repository gonna run his test according to my build. So, for example, if I'm changing something on the SDK, so it's also create a new version, temporary version of the SDK, and all the plugin unit tests gonna run also in this specific repository. And then, if I broke something by changing the SDK, then the Circle CI going to inform me, hey, the test failed on the test repositories. And then I will able to go and check what's failed and what's happened, understand what I'm broken. And this is like, instead of create, this is my idea how to solve a broken situation when somebody changes something on the SDK, and thereafter we understand the plugin is not working anymore.
Okay, I have a couple of comments about it, but let's start with the fact that a person that is writing a plugin first need to make sure that the process is passing code review, which I've seen many times that it's not happening, and the second that everything is covered by tests, at least unit test, which also in most cases doesn't happen for some reason.
Yeah,
So in order for all this to work, the first step will be to make sure that there is a code review and put a plugin is not the I don't know, the chaotic place to do whatever everyone want. It's not the purpose of this mechanism. So a plugin is a code, and if we are implementing it exactly as we are adding code to the SDK or the generic app or whatever. If it's a third party, it's something else. But also we can enforce some stuff. But internally, I've seen many cases where people are are pushing code to a plugin with no one that is looking at code. Of course.
And I think that plugin is can be very specific and complicated sometimes. And if I want that someone will make a code review for me, he should understand the requirement and should understand what the plugin should do. And it can take some time for someone that doesn't know the requirement, that doesn't know nothing. I think we have a little problem with it.
It's exactly similar to any new feature that you're writing in the SDK or the generic.
Because the plugin is it's sometimes very specific for a client. Like I can tell you in Hot, when we did integration with Nagra, it's a huge library and a huge plugin. And no one will use this plugin. So if I want to explain this project to somebody else, it can take 2 days just to explain him this requirement.
I understand, I understand what you're saying. Generally, what Ran means here is that when you're creating a new plugin, and there might be some infrastructure that can be common to other projects as well, this has to be reviewed. If you're writing something that is very proprietary and very related to a specific project, ideally it should not be even written by you, it should be written by somebody who is working on externally. But if we decided, or if they decided to do something that is very specific and very not related to the product that we're creating here, then obviously, yeah, you can basically do whatever you want, because we wouldn't be code reviewing a plugin that was written externally. So you can relate to that as something, but as something else. But when you even approach to writing a plugin, and maybe on the design part, you need to understand what parts of the plugin are actually reusable and have values, might have values in other teams. And this part has to be reviewed and get into the plugin framework that we're now discussing.
So
conceptually,
other developers.
Yeah, conceptually, there has to be some sort of a code review process for the plugins as well. And what Ran is pointing out, that currently, since the plugins are used both for shared, not necessarily shared, but very specific code and very, or sometimes general code, they are not reviewed at all. Not the general part and not the specific parts. And this is, I guess,
I have a problem with the fact that, for example, the OKHTTP. If everyone will create its own
we talked about it.
Yeah, of course.
HTTP provider.
There shouldn't be.
No, we talked about it.
But in this way, it will be like this because it's easier and it will be faster. And
what do you mean in this way? In what way?
So but we, Atanas and I, we talked about it in the tech talk that we should make the HTTP more flexible,
generic,
homogeneous. We should do it. So if you encounter a problem, you can handle it. Make it more flexible or generic for everybody. I can tell you that I made the HTTP client protected and not private because I wanted to extend it or add cookies or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we need to.
How we solve it? That's the question.
Now you're talking about a general problem that exists almost with every SDK or with every common code that you're creating. The first
but
person.
in plugins, it's more common to build your own because you are in
the current situation where plugins are free to go and there is no shared framework. It is by luck or by chance that you know that somebody else implemented something very similar and you can take
and even if you don't have the exact thing in the SDK, so you do something
you would write it again
yourself, and then
these exactly are the cases where we should be more mature and understand that if we have something that is already written but doesn't fit us 100%, we need to allocate the time and effort to generalize it and to actually make it valuable. And this is actually a process that exists in almost every SDK and every, let's say, development team.
It's a general problem.
Yeah.
In the
Once you create,
you see it more because it's.
Of course, and it happens in the SDK in the past a lot also. The first implementation that you're writing will almost always be very specific, not necessarily very, but it will be specific to your current needs because you cannot project always what other teams might need from what you're writing. You can try and generalize it in the first step. This is always good practice to make the code reusable on the first go. But provided that you wrote it the way you thought was appropriate for that time, the second time that somebody wants to reuse it and sees that something is missing, they should be the ones who generalize it. So this has to be part of the process, and otherwise we'll have many implementations of the same code on different plugins. So this is basically the fundamental aspect of creating a framework. Any framework, not just the plugins framework, an SDK or any other shared code that we would like to use.
If you will have multiple SDKs or you will have duplicate code.
No, I'm not saying multiple code. I'm saying, for example, in the HTTP example,
but this is how I don't know. I see it.
In the HTTP example, like I already said, in the HTTP example, we already wrote the HTTP example. Actually, there was one in the SDK already. There was a OKHTTP implementation on the SDK, and Karidi wanted something a little different. And in the plugin, the implementation was different. I understand why sometimes changing the SDK is not the easiest thing to do. That's what I mentioned in the beginning. So basically created some implementation on the plugins to make what's written in the SDK a little more generalized. And in the second time that somebody had to use it, and you mentioned the Scudeppler that was written in the Europe team, this was the point where things need to be generalized. And again, sometimes you don't have enough time and there's not enough resources to do it, but conceptually, if we're working on a product, there has to be time.
No, I think from the beginning, it should be,
yeah.
I don't know what was, I know, but not very specific. For example, to do a HTTP plugin.
Not
plugin, but
a framework, yeah. But the framework back then didn't even exist. We're now coming up with the
it exists in the SDK, for example.
So you're saying that in that case we should have changed the SDK.
I don't know about this specific, but in general, to change the existing code to be more general.
Basically,
I can tell you that in this specific implementation in the HTTP, it's a little bit complicated to change it because it can affect a lot of parts in our apps. And if
it will happen in the future that there are very sensitive areas in the code that you would. So as I said, it will also be an opportunity to see if there is something is written in the SDK that is too specific and we want to generalize it without harming what's currently in the SDK. We will probably rewrite it and put it in the framework. So, in the plugins framework. So I'm calling it actually a plugins framework, but the general idea is to have a framework that is common both to the SDK and to the plugins. Up till now, the SDK was the top level project or bottom level. It depends on the way you look at it, but never mind. Nothing was, the SDK did not inherit from anything. Yeah, okay. The root or the top of the tree, never mind. It didn't inherit from anything, and now the approach that we're suggesting is that some fundamental parts in the SDK will be exported into a new repository that will be common both to the plugins and the SDK. And initially, there will be some code duplication because we don't want to change anything necessarily in the SDK, but we do want it to be in the framework. It's fine. we will be creating some technical debt to remove the code from the SDK and actually use just the framework and not keep the legacy code forever. But this is another thing to tackle. So
I wanna say something very important. In the next, I don't know to say date, but in the next months, a month, or I hope that in a month, the plugin process of deploying a plugin will have a phase of reviewing. So currently, when we are building plugins, we just deploy to the system and everyone can use. What will happen next is that a plugin will be uploaded, it will be pending for review, the review will be done, and then it will be able then you will be able to use it. So something to keep in mind, so to be aware of. We will talk about it a little bit. I think Udi maybe will talk about it in the engineering meeting or something like that, but it's something to be aware of, let's say.
okay. So just to follow up on the plugin framework idea, so the two first action items that I can think of are basically creating this repository. Elad already did something with a new repository, and basically establishing it as accessible for everyone and to everyone know that what they should enter, and have some sort of a reviewing process.
What are they?
It's called plugin utilities, something like that. I'm not sure, but never mind. There is a repository that will be used for that. So that's one, and every new plugin needs to inherit from that. So currently, I don't think nobody has implemented the plugin that inherits from this repository. But the first action item will be to start using the framework as a dependency for each plugin that is built. And even more importantly, conceptually, now when creating a new plugin, first is to try to avoid using things that are currently existing in the SDK, especially the common code for doing things like HTTP client or whatever, and try to generalize the idea and actually adding it to the new repository. And if you're thinking of implementing something either on the level of the SDK or the generic, that there is a dependency of the plugin on the plugins, try to think of alternative solutions. And I know that there are issues with sometimes transferring data between the SDK and the plugin, and since they are now very related, it makes it easier. But we need to come up with solutions for transferring data, maybe creating a common object, serializable objects, whatever, that can be transferred between the SDK and the plugin. So before attempting to insert anything to a plugin that heavily relies on the SDK, that sits only in the SDK, try to think how it can be generalized and inserted into the framework and not be dependent on the SDK. These, I think, are the two action items. I can take upon myself to actually prepare this framework together with Elad, who's already started working on it. And we'll share some more information probably on the next meetups. But for now, when you're creating new plugins, think of this concept and avoid using anything that is tightly coupled to the SDK, because this is something that we would like to change. And that's it, I guess, on this, unless anybody else has any comments on that. Okay, then I guess we can move on to the next item on the agenda.
Yeah, so I think that we should do like a sync between us, so each one will tell exactly what he's working on. Because I don't think that we have anything prepared, unless someone is surprisingly prepared something.
Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can start there in Israel.
Israel, okay.
Okay.
So I'm working on the recycler view. I'm now going to add a new component, a recycler view component. I hope it will replace the grid and the list that we have now. For now, it's working as a standalone component because we have a problem to add it to the composite or dynamic component because they are used. We are using it. We are using this component as a list and not as a recycler view. So it's a little bit difficult to add it to this component inside this component. So it's just a standalone component. So we are testing it now, and I hope that next week you will be able to use this component and replace it with a grid and list. Yeah. When I will finish, I will show it.
Using the grid and list in the UI builder, for example.
Yes, UI builder will not support it yet, but when we will finish to check it and test it,
No, but
I will.
grid and list is supported in the UI builder.
What?
Creating
grid and list.
Yeah, I think. Grid and list is a standalone, and inside the composite, it should support UI builder. Yeah.
Standalone, I'm not sure it's there.
The UI builder is using the composite, not standalone.
Always composite.
Always.
So it won't work with the UI builder.
now.
To make this refactor, it will take a long time, and we hope to do it. I don't know when we will have time.
So, but maybe we'll
No,
talk
but-
about.
I don't know if we can do it.
Task that it's big task that.
Yeah, but we need to still figure out how.
Why we cannot use a standalone UI builder one? A screen with a standalone component?
Because the app doesn't know anything. The app doesn't know that it's a standalone or not standalone. There is an API, you return a list of components and you present them. Today it could be only one component, and tomorrow it could be multiple. Cannot guess what you are planning to use.
Okay.
If you want, this is why I don't. This is why I think that the more important. I don't know what you're doing. What is the reason you're doing it, and for each app you're doing it. But at least on the Europe team, in the LATAM team, they are completely migrating everything to the UI builder. While I don't know why in Israel you keep on maintaining templates and stuff like that. So my recommendation is to stop doing it. Like if you need to release a version using a template, this is fine. But to create new components and new style that doesn't use the UI builder, it's a waste of time. It doesn't go walk together with the roadmap of the company.
No, but I think that we want to replace the composite implementation to a recycler view.
This is true. This is true.
Yes.
Then,
One
you need
step.
a composite with. Yeah.
Okay, so this is one step, and we need to start
It's
somewhere.
not a step. I don't know.
It's a step because maybe I don't know.
it's
I don't
not. It's
we don't know about how to replace the composite to recycler view yet. So I think it could help, but maybe
No,
not.
it's a big task. That's the problem.
Currently, there is no use for standalone list and grid.
In the UI build.
I know that it's not implemented, but isn't it worth it to add it to the UI builder, to add the ability to the UI builder based on the code that you're writing now?
No, you can use the composite
No,
to show
we cannot.
list and grid.
No, we cannot use it in the UI because
But
the
the
UI builder is always a composite component.
If you put in a composite only list, so we would still list.
Yeah, but the composite is based on a list. If you want something that is solely based on recycler view, is it not worth it to add the recycler view standalone component that you're creating now to the
I think
builder?
I think that
or just the composite that has value. That's what I'm asking.
I think that we should do it because not all our screens are complicated and should use the composite. If you
project manager doesn't care if it's recycler or it's a list.
The problem is that
I know it's that he doesn't care.
So
what about performance? Is it the performance of the composite when it's displaying a standalone list? It's satisfying. Is it good enough? And the reason for changing is just technical.
Because if we want to use a horizontal list view, we cannot do it. We are now using a carousel.
So basically, you're suggesting that the standalone component based on recycler view has other benefits that we're not using today, or we'll work around them today.
Yeah, we can use. In that sense, we can use in this recycler view. We can use a horizontal list view. We can make it horizontal list view only from the JSON. We can do horizontal grid only from the JSON. We have a lot of benefits, but
add it to the composite.
Yeah.
The composite to the.
I don't know. Okay, but this means to refactor all the composite adapter to recycler view. I hope we will do it quickly, but I don't know when we'll have time for this.
No, but what I'm trying to say, this is fine, but what I'm trying to say is that basically what you're doing now is very project specific and no one else will use it.
Yeah, I understand.
That's the problem with these very specific implementations.
Okay, what I didn't know is that we cannot use a standalone component in the UI builder. This is what I missed. So because of that I did it, but now I understand it. I didn't know that.
Okay.
I thought that we can use a standalone component also in the UI builder.
Okay, what I suggest is next time to ask to make sure, because or to just try to debug. Look, the company is heading towards only using the UI builder. Templates are nice because they are there. We are not doing any deprecation or stuff like this, or we are not doing migrations, so it's there and it can be used. But each new development should be done to be able to be used in the UI builder. Otherwise,
I will talk about it with you. You will be able to use this component. I will talk with you about it as a horizontal list view inside the composite component. But let's talk about it later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all on my side.
Okay. What else is going on in your team?
Okay, so the last thing that I pushed was about the data source adapter. I think that you guys all know the new development that Zap team was working on. And if you don't, it means that we are aiming to get all our data from Atom feed models. Meaning there will be an adapter from the data source of the customer to Atom feed model. So the last development was taking images or media in general according to the so not media, but images from according to the image keys defined in the component's metadata. Currently, previously, what we had is only taking images. It was a mess. Actually, we took the large scale, and iOS took the small scale. If it was a cell, we took it from thumbnail media group if it says anything to someone. And basically it wasn't flexible enough. So now there's an ability to define which image you want to take from the Atom feed, Atom entry. Another thing,
Just I want to add about this.
Mhm.
That, eventually, the data from Applicator 2 will reflect with the key.
Yeah.
The keys in the CMS will be the key in
The image JSON key.
Yeah.
Another thing was separating the Atom entry and Atom feed from the AP model, meaning they have nothing in common now. Previously, the Atom entry was extending the AP model. And another
Gil,
thing.
I have a question about the fact that the key that you're using in the Atom. So this is connecting Applicator 2 to the data source. What happens if I don't have any image in Applicator? I don't have any data source in Applicator 2. What image then I will present?
No, it's not connecting to Applicator 2.
Okay, so explain.
The parser will put there whatever.
No, okay, let's take a flow, for example, okay? Let's say we have a component that defines an image key named image base, okay? And then we have a data source from the customer that is being adapted to an AP, sorry, to Atom feed, okay? That contains Atom entries. And in the Atom entries, there are media items.
Yeah, this I understand, but where you define this image key? Like if I'm using the UI builder, okay?
How? JSON.
What JSON?
JSON that defines the component.
What JSON? There's no JSON. There's API.
Every screen has a JSON. No?
What?
Every screen has a JSON string that represents the screen.
Okay, so I think we have a big problem of understanding what is the API of the UI builder. Okay, so I think we talked about it, and I invite everybody to take a look at video that was recorded, and Sergey did it. But you need to what currently happening. I will say it in 2 words, and we will talk about it maybe next week. But what's happening now is that there is an API that returns you a list of screens. In each screen, a list of components. In each component, you have some fields and the cell styles and stuff like that. Now, when what we did in order to support the old implementation is that basically, or to use the old implementation, it's the correct way, is there is an adaptation of the APIs to the JSON metadata. Now, where in this entire process we defined image key or something like that? Where is this happening? How could this happen?
It's happened in the where you define for each component.
Wait,
how you no, where you define the key to this image?
Why I need to define the key? I don't understand. I receive, if I'm not connected to Applicator 2, okay, let's assume that I have a feed of articles or a feed of videos, and I have.
If you're connected, let's say we are using Applicator 2. We have an image JSON key.
No, but with Applicator 2, I don't have a problem. But I want to focus on what happens if we don't use Applicator 2. I don't have Applicator 2. Tomorrow I'm implementing for Televisa, or already implemented, data source provider that is working directly with their data.
Okay, so let's talk about Applicaster 2, and maybe we will have an answer that will be clear for all of us. If you are working with Applicaster 2, you do define an image key, right?
If I'm working in Applicaster 2, it's okay because we are connecting basically. Also, it doesn't make a lot of sense from the beginning, but let's say, because it's only because the way the atom works, that the atom is basically a category. So basically, you have the atom, and on top of it, you add the metadata of the category. This is the reason that you need to connect the atom to the metadata of its category. Otherwise, you don't really need it. But this is why the Applicaster use case is not interesting, but continue.
Okay, so let's say you do define an image key. Eventually, it will be translated to metadata like we already know, right? And it will be contained in that metadata, component metadata, right?
No, right now, as I understand, the UI builder is give you a default image key, image base. So
It has one key, that's it. It uses only one key.
Okay.
So
It
just
uses only...
parser will use
But how? Okay, so I will give just like the use case that we are Reshet. Okay, this is what we currently work on. We have a model, okay, that we show in different screens, and in each screen we need a different image. I don't think it makes sense to have two instances of the model just to have another image, because it is like it does make sense to present a model differently in different screens. So how do we support it without some identifier?
No, you need an identifier, but this identifier doesn't need to be defined in Applicaster 2 or stuff like this. Is what I'm saying. Of course, you
talk about the UI builder.
Where you define it in the UI builder?
in the UI builder, you get a feed that is connected. It's not, it doesn't work the same because you connect a component to a feed and then you receive a feed. Okay.
Yeah, but
now each cell size is expecting a specific size, okay, or specific key. It's hard coded in the cell style or whatever that is looking for a specific key. And according to the cell style, it will take the relevant key. So if I have like an article and I have inside media groups, each media group contains, for example, 2 media items. One of the media items will be used in cell style X and the other will be used in cell style Y.
But you don't define the image key in the cell style. That's the you can define the image key in the cell style. Or you can, but it's not there now. I don't know. The question is how we want to define the image key.
Currently, you use the image base, and once we will need to add another thing. I tell you 2 things about it. First, the only problem that you have is with images with different scale.
No.
With different ratio.
Yeah. No,
it's not a problem that we have.
It's also a problem. Like maybe
but it's not the only problem.
That's the only problem that you have, because if the ratio is okay, why do I care if it's a big or a small? The app will shrink it accordingly.
Sometimes I want another image with the same aspect ratio.
Maybe it should look different. Yeah.
So we are not supporting it currently in the UI builder. We are not supporting it in the UI builder. You want on the same data model, different image of different screen. Super knowledgeable. No, if you want a different image for different screen in the same scale, I can understand the not scale. Sorry, I can understand the aspect ratio. But if you want to use, like, you need one image separately for a 4:3 and one for 16:9 or something like that. But if you want different image, I think that this use case is not, if you want, create another feed that will do the same and will give you the relevant image. It's not a big deal. It's not something that is hard to also ask the customer to do at all. It's only Reshet, this thing that Reshet has one feed that is showing this, and exactly the same feed they want to show as a magazine, and they don't want to do work that will do another request. What I think that should be done is that you pass the request with different parameter, and this returns you the relevant data structure with the relevant images.
Let's say we have an app that looks exactly the same on smartphone and tablet, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the aspect ratio is the same, but the images shouldn't be. So this use
What do you mean they shouldn't be?
Because you don't use the service that Applicaster 2 provides about scaling, right?
Why I'm not using the resizer? You mean the resizer? The resizer.
Yeah.
The resizer is a service that you set the URL. You tell him what to resize. You can take images from Google. It doesn't care if it's coming from Applicaster 2 or not.
Yeah, but all the purpose of using the Atom feed and the data source adapter is not using Applicaster 2. We don't want to
Resizer is not Applicaster 2. Resizer is a service that resizes images.
But how do I use it if not from Applicaster 2?
What do you mean Applicaster 2? You do a request to the resizer. If you look at the code, you will see. You pass it an image. You can pass it image. Imagine that I have an image, blah, 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 google.com/dog. You can pass this image. It doesn't care if it comes from Applicaster or not from Applicaster. It's a stupid resizer. It gets an image. It returns you this image resized. It's not related to Applicaster 2.
Doesn't matter if the image is in the Applicaster 2 or in Reshet server.
It doesn't care. It's a service of resizing, and probably there are multiple like this in the world.
Okay, I thought also it's related to Applicaster 2. It's connect to Applicaster 2.
No,
Yeah, I think they just.
It's not. It's a service. I will invite you to the repository if you want to show you that it's not on Applicaster 2. But the customer wants different images for the same model, and we also need to know how to present it. This is a requirement that we cannot abstract. So what we need to tell him, no problem, add to your API a parameter that will tell you what are the sizes or which type of key you want to be sent in order for you to bring me the relevant images, and then send me the relevant images. You cannot send me an array of images, and then I will need to, for each cell style of mine, to know if these images, it doesn't work. It can work if we're using a service of Applicaster 2. This is what I was explaining. But it cannot work because this is like our business logic. But it cannot work if we're using external services. Cannot work. Understand? Imagine that I'm connecting now to WordPress. Okay?
My
Same
point.
to the parser, the data parser, different requests, but to get the same data just with a different
For example, it's an API. It's an API call basically that should be dynamic or not. I don't understand what is the big benefit of having different images. It's a very specific use case. There are a lot of use cases in Reshet that doesn't fit with the way the company sees itself evolving.
We are using it in all our projects. I don't understand. Let's put the data source in the side for a moment. When we are using our Applicaster 2, we always adding few images in the same model.
Component set show single image. Each cell display single image.
Yeah, okay.
Image base, it will work. That's all.
Yes, for all
Okay.
the image. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not what. So what
In
is the problem?
Reshet, we have a different scenario, but if you will use image base for all cells, it will work.
No, you are using for cell style, for component, we want to use image base for the carousel. For the list, I want to use a large tab name
Why do you need different name?
because it's not the same aspect ratio. It's
No, so this is what I'm saying. If it's different aspect ratio, you are right. But that's the only reason.
okay. So
Different
so
aspect ratio.
you're not supporting it in the UI builder also for the different aspect ratio.
Basically, the different we're currently not supporting, but this is something that we will support. That's the only use case, different aspect ratio. And also, you don't need to invent key. You should just write the aspect ratio. There is no need for any knowledge to know what is image based, not image based. It should give you ratio, a key that says the ratio. That's it. And then you ask for a specific ratio in the cell style. And that's it. And if it doesn't give you, if this ratio doesn't exist, I don't know, either you do a fallback or not. But this is the way it should work. If you want the same images, multiple images for the same size, and then to put some logic to understand that the app should understand what to present, this is not a use case that
But
we
how
will want to support.
how do you know to request the aspect ratio?
You can't right now.
No, now I don't. Now what we have is an app is using the same aspect ratio along the app.
You want to do it like programmatically or defined in
No, now
Will
it uses the image base now. This is the basic one.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, like if I do not consider the new key as a image key, but as aspect ratio, it should meet your the requirements you just mentioned.
That's the only use case, yeah. And maybe there is also a better solution, but this is the only use case, yeah, that I would like to support. Aspect ratio. Aspect ratio. Even though also it's
So
not
can we can it's like okay, so this is we will call it in a different aspect ratio, but we can use it as a workaround for the same ratio, but the same image with the same ratio, but we will call it like we will request another ratio.
but you will not have any way to do that. Where you will write this code.
No, I just want to. I'm just in the end. I'm just asking for a key. This key should be okay.
Where you define the keys, you will not be able to define the
Okay.
keys.
So you are asking the image according to your ratio, the view ratio.
For example, I don't know exactly, but this is what I was thinking of doing. Yes.
So I think it's better not to do it. I think it will be better to.
That, by the way, this was already existing in the Atom. Yeah, it's exactly well, not exactly, but you have large and small, which is
Yeah,
kind of something like that. But
it was abused and
yeah,
there
this
were
I agree. This I agree. This I agree. The fact that it was abused, I agree.
I think we should define it, not let the view decide what will be the ratio.
No, the cell style, the way it works in the UI builder is that currently it just asks for image base. Okay, and currently the uses of the UI builder is the apps that are using the UI builder are either all of them are 16
Using
by
it as image.
9, all of them are one aspect ratio.
but I think about it in that way you want support dynamic aspect ratio that sometimes you do want.
What is dynamic aspect ratio?
I mean, you don't want just 16 by 9. I want a cell that is height is dynamic. Okay, and the first cell, the image will be in this side, and in the second it will be that side. I mean, just
No,
using that.
No, not supporting it. No, you choose a cell style. You choose a cell style, and the cell style defines you the aspect ratio.
But I mean, maybe we should support it because
But this,
Maybe. How many apps we have that are doing this?
currently, I guess like just a few. But why
So
should we?
you are limited the cell style. Like if I want the VOD item in the same family will have a different look, very different look in terms of aspect ratio. I don't know what else, but very different from show. Okay, and they are belong to the same family, so I
you have
cannot do
another.
it.
Why not? You have another cell style. I don't understand. What's the problem of doing?
The family you can have multiple sensors.
Yeah, but they must be in the same aspect ratio, the image, because we are taking.
The cell style.
Let's say VOD.
It's not. It's also not true because it depends on your data source. If the data source is smart enough to know to put for 16 or 9 images that are 16 or 9, and for images that are 4 and 3 or whatever you invent, it will work. It
Yep.
requires
Okay.
it requires the data to support it, and then it will work out of the box. You will not be able then to change the list, for example, that was 4 and 9. It will not work until they will change the data. This is
Yeah, but yeah, I understand. Yeah, I agree with you. But what Gil said before, it's that the same data source will
present.
contain few images.
Yeah, so this is currently we are not supporting, but what I will want to support is different cell aspect ratio. Not
Okay.
even convinced 100% in what I said, but I'm not 100% convinced in what I said. I invite you to open a part of Reshet that is using the same data source that it has a weird way of calculating each cell. I don't think that there are so many. I invite you to open in the world, not Applicaster. Open some content apps and take a look at components and data sources. And take a look how many contains different elements with different aspect ratio. It's very complicated to prepare the data. You're only thinking about the implementation sometimes, but also we need to think about the other side that needs to prepare the data. It's not simple for the one that is creating now each element. They don't care. They're giving us data sources. They all have systems. What they want to do is give us data that is WordPress or Yala or whatever. They don't go in deep into each element and putting specific size. It cannot work in the scale of the companies that we're working, Televisa, all these kind of people. And you will see also that Reshet will have problem to maintain this project. It's very problematic the way they configure their things. So on one hand, I 100% agree that it's very cool that we allow this flexibility, but in the end of the day, it's very complicated to maintain on the data side, not on the code side, on the data side. If we decided we want to do, there are a million solutions that you suggested, and we can do that. But in the end of the day, it's very complicated to maintain it on the data source. Think about it. They have systems and they have articles and they just throw whatever they want. They will not go to every specific element and say, okay, now I put 4 and 3. No, this I want 16 or 9. It doesn't happen. Doesn't happen.
Yeah, they have a system that already ready, and we are going to use what they have. They won't update it for us.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So again, and you will see that Reshet is a very bad example of really people that don't understand what is the cost of what they're implementing. They don't understand it.
I really agree with what you are saying, but the fact is that they are customers of us, and not only them, but we have lots of customers.
Yes.
They don't really know what they want.
This is okay, but we need to be smart enough to explain. We need to be smart enough to explain. And when we are encountering something like that, I will be happily explain this to everybody who wants to listen. I think that this behavior is very cool. In the end of the day, it's not usable. That's what I'm saying in the data side. Okay, it's
I
also
think
very cool. It's also very cool that we can change every single style and color in the app, right? It's also very cool on a different matter. We can change almost, there is a key for every letter in the app, different key. But in the end, no one can control it and no one can maintain it and no one really needs it. So in the
yeah,
UI, we decided to put some boundaries, and look, it's not a product that it's done and it's finished. We will continue. Now it's very limited. But
I agree that there's a trade-off that we need to consider, but I think that if the cost is low, we should be as flexible as we can.
Ran, I think we should talk about it later because maybe we don't have time
Yeah,
for
we
everybody.
kind of taken all the time to discuss it.
no,
Although
we
it
are,
was,
yes.
but it was
Yeah.
it was specific, and we kind of ran out of time with going on the next project. So maybe we should follow up with a quick review on other projects before we end the session.
No, I already need to leave, so you can continue, but I have to run to another meeting, actually. So I think if you want to continue internally, you're welcome.
If you leave it, we'll close the conversation, Raj.
I can leave the conversation open for you, and I would just not be here.
Let's just quickly go briefly on let's say important topics on what everybody's working on so that we are on the same page.
Okay, so another short one. I won't be too specific. Adding a plugin to handle all the data fields that comes from the customer data source, and we cannot map them to our data model. We put in generic mapping. So I'm preparing a data plugin, sorry, to address those fields.
I think you should demonstrate it next week for us.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, this sounds like a valid solution. This is related to the data source plugin, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
So every future project that will use data source plugin will probably encounter the same issue. So it's really something that is worth having a session on. Okay, good. Next up, Tarek.
Yeah, so hi. For me, I don't really have anything to update regarding components and plugins since I'm working on a specific project, which is Bellator. But I'm trying still to learn the Zap ecosystem. I'm working on this project with templates, still not using the UI builder, which I would love to maybe learn and to get to know how to use it, since it will be the main framework to build new apps from now then. So I would love to do that, and I would also love to have some sort of a roadmap for me in order to get into the business of creating new components and plugins, in order to start and learn how can I build my own components and plugins. So, but I agree with most of the stuff said today regarding decoupling the code, keeping stuff open, closed as much as possible for modification, but open for extensions, which is the open closed design pattern. But in general, yeah, I would love to get I need first of all to start and learn all of the SDK and the ecosystem, and how plugins works, what is a plugin, like what is a standalone plugin, what is I have a lot of stuff to still and to learn. But for now, I'm working on a specific project. I'm trying to with Elad also to include the recycle view that he is developing. We are testing that on the Better project. And that's it. For now, that's all I'm working on.
Cool. Okay, great. Dalia, go.
I work this week, released a new version, it was last week, for the protests with the refresh button.
Refresh button. It work?
Yeah.
Pull to refresh.
Fresh bubble?
Bubble. It's
Bubble.
like you put a.
How we handle it in the UI builder? Can we do it?
You will need to add a rule or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
We need to think about it.
And I'm working this week on other things for the YouTube parser. I'm using. We're using Borat, building Atom Tube, Atom XMLs from Atom Feed by entering YouTube playlist ID. So we had a problem with the YouTube API. We didn't get the playlist title. We need to add another call in order to get the title itself. So this is what I'm doing.
Okay. This is part of what project?
TVX. I don't know what country is it. Jonathan Gold.
Okay.
You don't get the title when you enter into Borat.
No, when you sending a request to YouTube, get all the items. You're not getting the
title.
You're getting the items, but you don't get the playlist metadata.
Playlist.
Yeah. So you need another call to get the playlist metadata itself.
You make it. You're adding it to the plugin?
No, it's not. It's JavaScript.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. So I worked mostly on the discovery project. I didn't do too much Android coding. I did get into the plugin ecosystem. I had to write some sort of a login plugin, something very similar to what was done in Hot, using the same infrastructure. And this is where I started playing with the plugins and came up with the ideas of separating and getting creating a plugin framework. Yeah, so that's basically it. This is what related to Android. There was some. It was a very tight schedule project, so we had to do some shortcuts, but yeah, we'll cover them. We created some technical debt.
When it should be released?
It was supposed to be released next week, but they kind of postponed the launch date. So yeah, now we're looking for the new date, but we'll start working on the technical debt that we created for the first release. So not much to cover on the Android side this week, on my side.
Cool.
Okay, so we have also James and Pablo.
Yeah, I'll go ahead really quickly, guys. I'll make this quick because I know we all got to get going here. So I'm working on the search bar functionality for Zap. It's done. It's implemented. Just need to today. Hopefully, I'll be done with my tests. So basically, what we had before was it would return a searchable items object, which really was very dumbed down. It didn't have much information in there, and nothing really that linked it to the app model that we needed at the time. So yeah, I've implemented that. It looks pretty good, and like I said, I should be done with my testing today. So that's really about it for right now.
Okay, great. So in the search component, you're talking about the search component that is coming to all the apps, or is it something in Zap? Sorry, I kind of missed the first part.
Yeah, it's the search bar. It's going in the generic app, so yeah, it'll be part of Zap, and you'll be able to use it wherever. But for right now, it won't be enabled automatically. Developers will have to enable it, but we'll get to that part. So yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, good. We have something related to that in the Europe team also.
Yeah, I think it's related to
Yeah,
all
it's
the teams.
related to everybody,
Very
but
important,
we did get requests on modifying some things that are related to search, so sounds very interesting indeed.
Cool.
Okay, thanks. Pablo?
Okay, yeah, on my side, I've been working on a new app using the UI builder. It's called Oye, and it's for the client on Panama, and it's just that I've been playing with cell styles, the new API to make cell styles and stuff like that. I just wanted to say that whoever is going to implement the new recycler view composite, that it would be nice if everybody could have like a separate meeting, and also any step you guys do documented on the wiki of the component. If generic, if it's going to be in the generic, put it on the wiki, all the how to use it, all the stuff. And also I recommended, as Ran said, to do making the component using the new UI Builder API and not the old metadata API, because it's a little more flexible, a little bit more flexible. Sorry, that's it for me.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Okay. Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess we're done. We'll try to dig a little less deeper into the technical aspects and take some things offline, but we'll learn to next time. Thank you for your time, guys, and see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey.